Welcome. My name's Angela Pamick. I'm the Arts Officer here at Moreland City Council, and I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet today. I'm currently on the land of the Wurundjeri Woi-wurrung and Aboriginal people of the Kulin Nation, and pay my respects to their elders, past, present and emerging, their cultural beliefs, heritage and continuing relationship with the land. And I acknowledge that Aboriginal sovereignty was never ceded. I'd also like to extend that respect to other First Nations people who are present here today. So as I said, this will be a recorded session for anyone that's unable to join us here today. And without further ado, I would like to hand you over to Anna Held, who is the Arts Infrastructure Officer here at Moreland City Council. So thanks, Anna.
Anna, you're on mute.
Excellent start. Thank you so much, Angela, and welcome everybody. I am really excited to tell you about Making Space today, and I'm sure we're all very excited to be getting creatives back into spaces soon and doing what we do. So I'm going to take you through some information about the program, the applications and assessment process, and then at the end I'll tell you a little bit about our spaces and make sure that you're across what's on offer, and at the end there'll be time for questions that I'm sure you will all have. So as you may have gathered, if you've done a bit of reading, this is a program run by the Brunswick Design District. Now the Brunswick Design District is a partnership between Creative Victoria, RMIT and us, Moreland City Council, and it's really about making sure that Brunswick and the surrounding areas stay a creative. So, we are building on Brunswick's creative heritage and are positioning this district as a nationally and globally recognised innovation city and design. So let's talk about Making Space. So Making Space is a residency program for people in the creative industries, either individuals or groups, and allows you to connect in with temporary spaces in some of our key venues around Brunswick and Coburg. And we're really looking at supporting the richness and diversity of creative culture in Brunswick and Coburg. On offer are 45 residencies at our partner venues, which we'll go into a little bit further, but there's 7 terrific venues on offer. Blak Gallery, BRUDI, that is a new venue you may not have heard of, but I'll tell you a little bit about it. Brunswick Library, Brunswick Town Hall, Coburg Library, Schoolhouse Studios and Siteworks. And within those 7 venues, there's many spaces available that can support different creative practices. Making Space includes a temporary space for between 1 and 5 months and a small cash stipend of $1,000 that's yours to spend on the project as you see fit. So it might be about setting up that space for that time. It might be paying yourself a salary to work for that time. It's really up to you how that is spent. And that is, oh yes, and of course, in addition to that space, there are the host venues that will be looking after you, but we are really focusing on building a community through this as well. So there'll be networking opportunities and opportunities to really share what we're working on, talk through creative ideas and just meet other artists and venues in our area. I'm going to read these to you and then talk to them just so I make sure I get the wording correct. But the objectives of Making Space from our perspective are to support a diverse range of creative individuals and collectives, that's you, to support and connect a network of creative venues, and then to develop multi-sector partnerships focusing on strengthening 2 of Victoria's key creative neighbourhoods, Brunswick and Coburg. So basically there are kind of 3 rings to the program. It's supporting the creatives at the centre, that's you. It's supporting the places where you can work, that's the creative venues. And then the 3rd ring, I guess, is supporting the community. So that might be through meeting a venue that you later can have a placement at. It might be meeting another artist that then sparks a new idea. So the idea is to keep investing in creatives, venues, and then the creative community in Coburg and Brunswick. Our outcomes. One of the things that is really important about creativity, I think, is allowing yourself to fail. So one of the big things that I wanted to stress about this is that there's no creative outputs that are required as part of this program. That said, there are some outcomes. So there's a minimum number of hours to be spent in the space, just so we're making sure that these resources are going to their best use. And there's an acquittal process at the end for successful applicants that kind of talks about your journey and what's happening. So that said, there's no creative output. There is definitely opportunities for creative output, but it would be a separate conversation. So for example, Schoolhouse have a gallery space and an event space. The libraries are really keen to talk further with their residents about other different projects, but it would be a separate process and a separate mission on top of that. Let's talk about eligibility. So these are getting into the fine points. We talked earlier about it being available to people in the creative industries. And I'm going to read the Creative Victoria definition because it's such a broad strokes definition, and we make sure that we're covering everybody. So the creative industries encompasses disciplines as diverse as games development and graphic design, fashion and filmmaking, theatre, dance, industrial design, comedy and craft. And they include activities that are commercially driven and community-based, experimental and export ready, and everything in between. So that's a really broad definition that lets you know that we are looking at a lot of different opportunities and practices for this program. In terms of eligibilities, there is applicants must have a connection to the City of Moreland. How we describe that usually is work, live or play in Moreland, but we are also open to hearing about how you might have a relationship with Moreland that doesn't fit into one of those three. So there's an opportunity to let us know how you've connected with Moreland, but really we're looking at the impact on Moreland from your project as well. Pretty straightforward, but we're working towards a creative project, work or product or exhibition. And we already covered off those objectives. Remember the 3 rings of creatives, venues, and the community. So we're making sure that you can talk to those 3, and we'll also in a moment cover off the really specific objectives that we're looking for you to cover in the application process. And then we want to make sure that nothing illegal is happening. So we're demonstrating that the proposed activity is consistent with all of the different laws and the Equal Opportunity Act. And just a note to say that this is open to both not-for-profit and commercial applicants. This is a really important point, which is that the Brunswick Design District really encourages applications that align with the partnership's commitment to diversity, inclusion, and respectful engagement with the wider community. Part of what makes Brunswick and Coburg so wonderful is the diversity of creatives that are based here, and we want to make sure that that continues. So preference will be given to applications that encourage and champion creatives from diverse cultural backgrounds, Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander creatives and their culture, deaf creatives, creatives that identify with having a disability, LGBTQI+ creatives, that champion environmental sustainability and champion respectful partnerships with other creatives and community groups and organisations. And then, as we mentioned, that creative industries definition is really quite broad, so we're making sure that we're going to be supporting a diversity of creative practices through making. Ineligible projects, just to cover this off as well, it needs to not breach any of the state and Commonwealth government public health measures to slow the speed of spread for COVID-19, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. Any activities and projects that are not identified as within the creative industries, if in doubt, reach out, and I'm happy to have a chat about your specific project or practice. Activities and projects already or partially or wholly funded by council. So some of you will be frantically putting together Flourish grant applications for this evening that are closing. Just to let you know, you can definitely apply for both, but you won't be able to receive both. We also can't take applications from people that have lobbied or canvassed councillor or council officers. Anyone that's got an outstanding Moreland City Council acquittal from a previous grant, and anyone where the application's organisation is benefiting from gaming machines. The last note there is just to say, for this round of Making Space, we were unable to secure a completely soundproof venue, so we haven't got any art forms that are appropriate for musicians recording performance or choral singing. That said, if you are a musician who has an idea that might work in a non-soundproof space, please have a chat to me. I'd love to hear your ideas. How to apply. So the first thing I would say is that on the BDD website, and Angie's already shared that link, is a giant document called the Program Guidelines. And that is your Bible of what to have to look for when you are applying. A lot of this will be covered today. Then also in that Program Guidelines, there are all of the questions that will be asked through Smarty Grants so that you can have a bit of a look ahead of what we're going to ask you and what you need to prepare before you log in to start. Then having a time to prepare your responses and support material and submit through our online platform. The links again are on bdd.org.au/makingspace. When you've done that, you'll get an email, and just a note that no late applications can be accepted and only one application per person. As we mentioned before, we are looking to support our priority groups through this. So if there's anything that is an obstacle to you putting in an application and you need to do it in a different way, for example, put in a video application or get some support with the process, then please reach out. We'd love to hear from you. That's the email address there. And in the guidelines, there's also my phone number and the other details on how to get in touch. In terms of assessment process, so we will be making sure that it is fair and transparent, and that so council officers will initially have a look at the bunch of applications and just make sure that it meets the eligibility requirements. Then all of the eligible applications will be sent through to a panel to have a look at. And then from that panel, the recommendations are sent to Moreland City Council's Director of Engagement and Partnerships for the final endorsement. And everybody that applies will, of course, be notified of the outcome, but there isn't a lot of opportunity for feedback due to the large volume of applications. So let us know if you do need specific feedback. Just to also assure you that anybody on the panel that has got a relationship with you in terms of a friendship or if you've worked together needs to declare a conflict of interest, so they will sit out of assessing your particular application in that instance. Here's the criteria that I was talking about, and it kind of goes back to those three rings, the creative and the community and the venues, but looking at the creative and the community. So the first one in terms of what we're assessing by is creative merit. Just to be really clear on that, we're looking at dedication, professionalism and merit, but appropriate to your career stage and type of practice. So we won't be looking at an emerging artist in the same way as an established artist. It really needs to be appropriate to the level of practice that you're at. We want to see how it's going to help you, what the impact and the benefits will be from this residency, and then the impact and benefit to the community, like we spoke about earlier, and how that, again, can feed back in the future project, might help us build up Brunswick and Coburg. The terms and conditions are listed in the guidelines as well, but I'll just highlight that you know, there will be payment details required and a contract with us, as well as a contract with the host venue to just make sure you're abiding by their policies. And then there are some documentation requirements and a little bit of an acquittal at the end to make sure that we have feedback from you to make it better in the future. Copyright and intellectual property, anything that you create as part of this residency is yours and yours alone. But we do also note that if you are using other people's materials or any copyright material, it's your responsibility to seek out the appropriate permissions. This slide makes me sad to put up, and hoping that next year this really isn't a thing. But we do acknowledge that it is a really difficult and unprecedented time at the moment with COVID-19, and that if we have to, that we will of course be finding different ways to deliver this program if lockdowns or other things impact the delivery of the program, and that might be an at-home residency and a stipend to at least provide some level of support and online networking. But I'm really hopeful that that won't be a thing. The timeline I don't really need to highlight too much, except to remind you that applications will close on the 3rd of October at 11:59 p.m, so just before you go to bed, and the residencies will be held from December through to June next year. Okay, let's talk about our venues. So as I mentioned, we've got 7 venues and lots of spaces within those. There are a lot of spaces. So in that guidelines document that I was talking about, there's an appendix that is pretty much like a catalogue of all of the spaces that are on offer, but it can be a little bit overwhelming. So the lovely Angela has done some amazing Excel work for me as well. So at the back of that appendix, I know you can't read this, but at least you know what it looks like. There are a couple of tables just to help, which is a breakdown of space by creative practice. So you can have a look at the type of space you need and kind of cross-reference which spaces will support your practice. And there's also an appendix that outlines accessibility information if you need to look at the spaces by accessibility. And then from there, have a read of all of the information that the venues have put forward about their space, so you can get a really good idea of what might be a good fit for you. Now I'm going to take you through our venues. So the first one we'll talk about is Blak Gallery, and I'm hopeful that most of you have already discovered this beautiful gallery. They also run a space called Blakademy, which is what they are offering up as part of Making Space. And so it's the first dedicated Black and people of colour library, and it has an incredible array of materials. And they've got hot desks for study, they've got a group workshop space, and writing and community meeting spaces. So there's 2 short-term residencies at Blakademy available, and they are available to First Nations artists only. BRUDI. So BRUDI is a new space that was formerly the Brunswick Business Incubator, and it's recently been taken over by Ethical Properties Australia. So BRUDI stands for Brunswick Design and Innovation Centre. They are looking at a new and innovative, vibrant campus at Victoria Street, Brunswick, to help creative people explore their practices and how these can be developed into businesses, opportunities and solutions. So they're not an exclusively creative industries area, so they have a lot of medtech, they've got a lot of other small startups and other companies based there, but they really are a community that are trying to integrate and support each other in developing these things. And they really are excited about bringing these spaces to life. So the building itself is 2 old school buildings. They are currently renovating them, and they really are a blank slate. And Betty from BRUDI, who is our contact there, really wants you to know that the spaces that are pictured in that catalogue are blank slates for you. So you're welcome to paint them as you wish. You're welcome to do whatever to those particular rooms. And this is our longest term residency because it is about integrating with BRUDI and what they are offering. We have 2 of our libraries that have joined this program. They were formerly involved in the Writers in Residence program, which has been rolled into Making Space. So the first one is the beautiful Brunswick Library, and they are looking at, supporting a diverse community by developing a culture that fosters innovation and creativity. So they have got a huge amount of research materials, different programs that are offering exchange of ideas, and are very keen to connect in with local creatives and really activate those spaces. So the Brunswick Library has a maker space, but also a research and writing space. So either of those practices work really well in that space. There are also, I should say, both Brunswick and Coburg Library, that are two libraries, are very interested in artists and creatives that are wanting to engage with the community that are accessing the library. Coburg Library, just an additional note that they have a new makerspace which has just been built. That includes, they've given me a list, which is great, the sewing machine, an overlocker, 3D printer, recording equipment. So that is available as part of this program, and really they want to see it used and activated and starting to be known by creatives such as yourself. Schoolhouse Studios. You may, back in the days pre-COVID, remember that there were two Coles supermarkets really close together at Coburg. So one of those giant supermarkets has been taken over by Schoolhouse Studios that were formerly in Collingwood. And they have converted it into a really amazing creative commons. So the photo there is the studio huts that they've built in the body of this supermarket. And there's also another couple of spaces on offer. One of them is the old Coles offices that are upstairs. And they even have the vault and the old chutes. And the 4 pillar space is kind of an open space that would be really great to develop a physical work. And that's on offer. They have got a really strong community. Again, it's a fairly new space and they've been in lockdown for a long time. So they're really looking forward to welcoming creatives into their space. Seat at the Table are doing some really exciting things. So they're based at Brunswick Town Hall, and they are supporting political works focused on racial and gender equality. So there is 2 spaces on offer there. One is literally a table and desk space that's a conversation space and a space to work amongst other similar artists working on different things. And then there's a more private office there too that is kind of separate and allows more personal development work. So there's 4 medium-term residencies available at Seat at the Table. Siteworks is our last venue on offer. So Siteworks is based at Saxon Street and is a community facility that provides meeting and education, rehearsal spaces, and they describe themselves as a live research-driven project, more than a venue for hire, and being placed there is an exciting opportunity to contribute to the future of the site. They have a lot of different spaces on offer for us. There's 26 short-term residencies available at Siteworks, and they are really excited to gather artists in space again and to start to rebuild and build that community of artists and creatives in Brunswick. I think I've spoken enough. So I'm going to open up the floor to any questions that you might have. So you can either pop them in the chat and Angela will get them for me, or feel free to raise your hand, which you can do by pressing the little circle with the face, and then hopefully I can see you.
So we've only got the one question in the chat at the moment that wasn't responded to, and Camilla has asked what kind of recording equipment is at the Coburg Library, and given we are unable to make music audio because of sound restraints, what might it be used for?
The recording equipment. I think that I can have a chat with them about where and when that can be used and what it can be used for, and I can get back to you. So if you wanted to pop your email to me, that would be great, and then I can have a look. I don't know the exact details of what recording information is for.
Seb's now asked the question, could you please speak more about the connection to moorland? Moorland, what I call it, sorry. Work, live, play. So if you can speak a bit more about that.
Yeah, sure. I'm just seeing that there's a few questions around that as well. So the connection to moorland, really what we're looking for is artists that are going to be, and creatives that are going to be encouraging activity in the moorland area. So as I mentioned before, live, work and play are the definitions that we look at, but there's also opportunities for you to make a case that you're connected to moorland in a different way. But really this program is looking about how your proposed project will really impact the creative communities in moorland.
The next question, I think you probably answered Amy's question there. Amelia asks, you mentioned a minimum hours required in the space. Can you please speak?
Of course. So in the appendix one that I spoke about in the guidelines, in that kind of catalogue, there is a grid that tells you the minimum hours per space per residency. So really for a 1 month residency, for example, it ends up being about 5 days as a minimum. And it's just to make sure that we aren't providing these spaces and they're used for a day and then go unused. We really want to make sure that we're maximising the use of these incredible spaces over time. But yes, you can find all of that information in those guidelines and in the appendix one, just to have a look at if it's manageable for you.
Thank you. Ashley asks, which spaces would be open to an open studio dynamic where members of the public are able to walk in and out?
That's a great question. I know that the libraries, for example, are really interested in projects where we're connecting in with public and community. And depending a little bit on COVID restrictions, some of the others maybe as well. So it would be great to have an idea of what project you're proposing, and then I can again have a look at what might be a good match. There's not many of them that are sort of public facing. So the libraries would probably be the best bet in terms of if you wanted to have people through and interacting with your works.
We might go to, there's quite a few more here in the chat, but we might maybe just go to Sonia, who has her hand up. So Sonia, if you want to ask your question. You'll need to unmute yourself because I have muted everyone. Maybe not, maybe I'll need to unmute her. Well, I'm trying to unmute you. Okay, maybe Sonia, maybe just pop your question in the, it's not letting me unmute you at the moment. So we'll move on to the next question then. Bear with me while I just catch up again. So Fizz has asked, you spoke briefly about the backup plans if we are not able to access the spaces due to lockdown. Would you be interested in learning, more about what an at-home residency might look like?
Of course, and we would be silly not to be thinking about it, unfortunately. So I think the way that I am hoping, most of the residencies are longer term. So I am hoping that it would only be a part of any residency that would happen at home. But for the shorter term residencies, if that were to happen, the stipend would still be yours to use on your project as required. And you would still be linked in with a host venue that would check in with you weekly and have a chat. So you've just got that sort of sounding board that sometimes we don't get when we're working from home alone. And also all of the networking opportunities that are part of this program would still be available to you. You would still be part of our residency program in that way. Any opportunities, any gatherings would still be yours. Does that answer the question? I'm sorry.
I think so. Darren has asked, are workshops defined as creative pursuits?
Say again, sorry, and?
Are workshops included and defined as creative pursuits. Darren might need to give a bit more information in terms of what he refers to as a workshop, perhaps.
Yeah, I mean, developing a workshop or hosting a workshop, there's definitely spaces that would work for that. It depends a little bit what industry you're talking about, but provided it falls in the creative industries, that's fine. Just bearing in mind, again, that we're looking for ongoing things, so not a one-off workshop. You would need to be either planning and preparing for that workshop and then the presentation of it, or looking at other ways of using that space to its fullest potential. So not just a one-off workshop, but certainly the development of a workshop program or anything like that would be eligible.
Thank you. And now Angela has asked to remind us of the total number of residencies available, and which can be found in the guidelines, and perhaps talk a little bit more about how to nominate the space that we want, or do you place us according to our creative project? So just how that process is working.
Yeah, of course. So there's 45 residencies available, and they are of differing lengths. So some of them, like Siteworks, are a 1 month program, and some of them, like BRUDI, are 4 to 5 months. So it's really various. And in terms of how you nominate, in the application form, you are asked what your first preference would be of a venue. So you would choose what you are particularly interested in. And then there's a form for you to fill out if you are interested in other spaces as well, or if you would be happy to be placed anywhere, you can fill that in for us. So that's part of the assessment process that we'll be looking at, is who is applying for what spaces, what the best fit is, and then if you are open to going somewhere else and there's still capacity, then we would be looking at, placing you at your second preference.
Thank you. Deborah's asked what would be the best place for working with clay, and I think just in terms of any of these sort of art forms, the best bet is that table that Anna referred to. It actually has those sorts of art forms listed. So if you want to add anything to that, Anna.
Yeah, that would be great if you can go and have a look. Off the top of my head, I think Siteworks have got the most facilities set up for clay, but BRUDI and Schoolhouse have the studio spaces. If you had your own equipment, you could have a look at that. That grid, like Angela said, because that will tell you what spaces are available for that type of practice.
Thank you. Darren's actually just written, and I'm sorry I didn't say this earlier, Darren. So I think in reference to the workshops, he was referring to screenwriting and storytelling. So I think what you mentioned anyway sort of covers that. Next one. So Dennis has asked, with Siteworks, you mentioned rehearsal spaces. Are they for live music?
No, sadly not. Because of the soundproofing issues, they would need to be considered. A lot of the other neighbouring spaces are used, and the residents in the neighbouring areas would need to be considered. So we can have a chat if there's specific questions about live music, if it's a quieter art form, if you think that you're recording one at a time. But certainly, unfortunately for this round, no band rehearsals, no loud orchestral, no choral things, just because the spaces don't allow it, sadly.
Thank you. Seb's got a question here. Are there any restrictions on the type of equipment that can be brought into a space, say workshop machinery?
No, there's not, but there is. It is done at your own risk, and it will certainly be up to the host venue about what can come into their spaces and what's safe to bring into their spaces. So it would be a conversation with your venue as well when you're placed, just to make sure that it covers the safety requirements of there. But for example, Schoolhouse is an empty studio hut, so you would be expected to be bringing in your own equipment if you were working there.
And also just keep in mind the insurances and things as well, so they won't necessarily be covered by the site.
Yeah.
The next one here, Amy asks, are there kilns available at any of the spaces?
Are there what, sorry?
Kilns for firing?
I think there is at Siteworks. Do you know, Ange, offhand?
I was hoping you wouldn't ask me. I believe there is one, but I actually feel like it might have been, I think I was surprised to think that it was one of the making spaces at the libraries. I will try and have a look in between questions, but I'm not sure I'll get a chance to look at the table in between questions.
Yeah.
But yes, again, go to that table that has the art forms and the appendix, and it will tell you. It will be mentioned there if they've got one. Isabel has asked, what would be your venue recommendation for painting?
Look, lots of them are set up for painting. So I think it would really depend on the length of residency that you were looking for and the type of privacy you were looking for. So if you wanted to come in for a month and really do an intensive work, then Siteworks would be a really good fit. If you were looking for a longer term space, then BRUDI would be a great fit. Likewise, the library maker spaces, I think, are open to painting. I'd have to double check that grid again. So there are a lot that are open for visual arts and that kind of art form. So go back to that grid and have a look at which venues have put their hand up for that kind of work too.
Thank you. Reese has asked, are there opportunities within the residency to work further with Moreland Council and host venues? For example, opportunities to exhibit and commercial opportunities as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's what this is about. It is creating those relationships. You might create a relationship with a venue that allows you to present there in the future. The Schoolhouse Studios have said that they would love their residents to have an opportunity to book the gallery space, for example. And we will be, when we are catching up, we're catching up all together. So all of the venues and all of the residents from the different venues. So there's lots of opportunities to build relationships with us, with other venues and with other creatives. That is what it's about, is trying to form connections all together.
Excellent. Dennis has asked a good question. Can you approach the site directly, so the library, for example, and discuss the idea that you have and how it might fit in or not?
Yeah, I'd be really open to that, because some of the details would be really interesting to see. But I think the best way to do that is to contact us, and we'll put you in touch with the venue to make sure that you we can answer it first if we can. Unfortunately, they're all in lockdown, so there hasn't been the opportunity to go and visit spaces and things like that. But certainly send us an email, and at the end, in a moment, I'll pass on our details, and I can certainly forward it through to the venues if you've got specific questions, or if you wanted to have a chat, I can set that up.
Thank you. Em has asked, are there any spaces that are already set up for photography and video?
Let's go back to that grid, Ange. I think we might need to open it up.
Yeah, okay.
That are already set up. Is there a dark room on offer? I
think just as a general thing, like when you're talking specific things like that,
we might
just refer to that table. Yeah, I'm just opening it up now, but yeah, refer to that table, and it actually makes everything pretty clear from there. I just don't remember everything off the top of my head.
Yeah. There are a lot of spaces, so we're just trying to remember all of the details.
So we might, while that's loading and opening up, I might just go on to the next question then, which was from Gab. You mentioned projects have to be in line with COVID restrictions. How does that affect performing arts rehearsals?
That's a great question, and one that we really don't know at the moment is the honest answer. So hopefully on Sunday we'll get a bit of a roadmap idea of what's happening into the future. But pretty much the theatre residencies might be a safer bet for, next year, early to mid next year, to try and make sure that we are in a place where we're going to be able to have people in spaces together. But of course, anything we do has to just be following the state government laws that are in place at the time. So we'll do our very best to make sure that we can shift and change as we need to. But as we've all been doing, and as you've all been doing, we'll need to be flexible and make sure that we're abiding by any laws that are in place at the time. I wish I had a crystal ball and could tell you.
So do I. Now, the next comment is actually from Sonia, who would like to ask her question in person. So I'm just trying to find you, Sonia, so I can unmute you. But if you're able to unmute yourself, go for it.
Oh, thank you very much. Now, I understand there's Flourish grants running at the same time in parallel. I'm a multidisciplinary artist, and there's two different projects. Am I able to apply one project to Flourish and different project to empty spaces, making space?
Making space, yeah. We would generally not fund somebody for two different things across two different grant platforms, just so we are trying to spread the love as far as possible. In terms of eligibility, and I'm looking at you a little bit because I'm in terms of different projects but the same applicant. I'm
in
not
the past. Well, yeah, there's sort of a pre-COVID and a during COVID. In the past, if they were separate projects, like completely separate projects, there was the possibility, but the eligibility thing here is about acquittal. So you would need to acquit one project before you're actually eligible for the other. So because the Flourish and Making It a Mall and the Making Space programs running concurrently, it's unlikely. So you could apply for both, but you would actually only be successful in one.
Yeah.
Is the general rule with Moreland Arts grants that you can only apply to one grant every financial or calendar year?
No, it's to do with that acquittal. If you're, like, for example, if like some of our previous grants, they might be within a financial year and have a project that doesn't need to finish by a certain date, but they have finished it because that's their project date time. As long as they acquit their project, then they can apply for the next one. So it's all about that, having one active grant round at a time.
And it's because the decisions between Making Space and Flourish sort of are around the same time. So there's no way you would be able to quit Flourish before a decision's made. Yeah.
Sadly not.
And just to clarify, this is sort of one of the rules that our auditors have put in place. It's not necessarily something that, unfortunately, we have much flexibility around.
And could you also email me the recording info the other guest asked earlier before? You mentioned to pop your email in, if you could.
We'll actually send out a link to this recording and also the PowerPoint presentations to everyone that has booked in through Eventbrite. So we'll do that in the next couple of days.
I mean, there was another person that asked about questions about music recording equipment. And
okay. Yes.
Is it Anna? Yeah, mentioned to pop an email so you would send info on that.
Yes, okay. And I see that you've got that in the chat. So I'll collect all these chat comments and we'll make sure that gets to you as well.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sonia. So moving on to Gab, she asks, can we collaborate with artists outside the program within the space?
Yes, providing we are meeting with COVID laws about gatherings and numbers, and also you'll need to clear it with your host venue just in terms of their processes for having external people on site that are not part of their residence. But yeah, absolutely, that's part of the process.
And Dennis here has asked, if you already have a musical and don't need to rehearse it but want to kick it off as a business, BRUDI, so I think this is specifically to BRUDI as a residency, would they be able to help with that? Would that sort of fit? Yeah,
absolutely, and there's a few spaces that would be possible for that kind of project planning and that next the next steps. If you're not sort of doing loud music rehearsals, there's certainly spaces that can accommodate planning and those next steps like you talked about. And BRUDI are design focused, but they're not necessarily exclusive, so it would be something that would be quite interesting and different for them to look at too.
Sonia's just asked about the photo studio space, but I've just referred her to the table, which, are there any other questions? I think that might actually...
Any other questions at all?
Yeah, if I've missed any, could you please put your hand up, because I think I've got them all.
Beautiful.
Any hands up?
So I'm just going to put those contact details up just for a moment to give you some time to write them down. So hopefully most of you have already found the BDD website and the Making Space link. There's a link on that space to download that guidelines document. It's very beautiful, it's very long, but it has got all of that stuff that you're asking about in terms of practices that are available in each space, and also the venue's own descriptions of their space, so you can get a bit of a better idea. Then there's my contact details there. If you have got any other questions, or once you've gone through that and you are still not clear on whether it would be a good fit, then please reach out. I'm in Monday, Tuesdays and Wednesdays, so just to be aware that I'm not around every day.
So I've just got that. So just to address some of those, the photography and the ceramics one, just looking at the table now, and again, I cannot sort of stress enough how useful that it is just to go to that table. So the ceramics, for example, BRUDI Space 1, 2 and 3, the Schoolhouse Studios, the 2 studio huts, 1 and 2, and Siteworks Art Room are all appropriate for ceramics. And I'm pretty sure I remember one of them actually having a kiln amongst all of that. Photography, for film and projection art, Black Dot BRUDI is available for that. I've just lost it. Studio Huts 1 and 2 at Schoolhouse Studios, as well as Schoolhouse Studios number 5, the office space. And Siteworks also have 3 spaces, including an editing suite as well. So there's quite a number of possible options there as well.
Beautiful. Like, there's no more questions. I'll just leave dead air for 1 minute. Thank you so much, everybody. We were really excited to see you in spaces next year and to get back to having a vibrant creative community in Brunswick and Coburg. And we are here if you have any other questions about this project or anything else, so please reach out. And I might end it there. Thank you, everybody.